Hey everyone, I'm Chris Lesniak,
And I'm Rob Byer, and this is
the Debate Math Podcast.
Debating Mathy topics and Mathy pedagogy with Mathy people just like you.
Let's get into this month's debate. So, math is full of algorithms. These are generalized procedures or sets of rules to be followed in solving problems of a given type.
This includes the standard algorithms for subtraction and long division in elementary school, all the way to the distance formula and the quadratic formula in high school.
However, some may ask, should we be teaching students these methods, or should we dump the algorithms?
Well, that sounds like a debate. And here arguing we should dump the algorithms, we have an educator who is shifting the way we view and teach mathematics. She's a mom, former high school math teacher, university lecturer, and the founder of Math is Figure Outable. Math teachers around the world rave about her online Building Powerful Mathematics workshops. For over 20 years, she has been helping leaders and teachers reach more students in less time so students math with confidence and success. This guest also believes, wait for it, fruit is fruit. Fruit does not belong with chocolate, nor dessert. Fruit is fruit. It is Pam Harris. Welcome, Pam.
Thanks. I appreciate that. It's good to be here. To be really clear, I like fruit. The problem is, you give me some nice cheesecake with fruit on it, then I got to have dessert after.
I love that.
So
That makes sense. You know what? I get it.
can't have double. I gotta have some control somewhere. Yeah, control somewhere. That's it.
So, can you tell our listeners where you are and what your current role is?
You bet. I'm located in Austin, Texas. My current role is that I'm the founder of Math is Figure Outable. We're a small team. Our mission is to revolutionize the way we view and teach math around the world. So we're creating lots of stuff, online workshops. We have a coaching community, and I'm having lots of fun. I was telling you guys earlier, I just turned in my second book in a series of 5 with Corwin. So I'm head down doing a lot of writing. Super exciting to just get lots of really good mathing ideas out there to empower teachers.
The question that we always ask our guests: when did math first become controversial for you?
So, if I can give maybe 2 moments, one moment is that I landed in classrooms about the same time that graphing calculators did, and so here I was as a student teacher. I'm supposed to know all the math because I've just graduated with my math degree, and all of a sudden I could play with the math, and students could as well, and it kind of threw open like who's in charge here and who owns the knowledge. And it was kind of freeing and empowering and fun, and I was really interested in it. I got lucky that my cooperating teacher was one of the very first that kind of dove in and got really good at it, and so I became kind of a graphing calculator expert. That set me on my route to work with leaders and teachers and do professional learning. At the same time, I had my own kids. So my oldest kid started going to school, and things like this happened. One day, he came home, and I said, "Hey, dude, I'm just kind of checking in. Do you know your multiplication facts? Do you know your fives?" He looked me straight in the eye, and he's like, "No." And I'm like, math teacher mom, panic. Because if my kid doesn't know his multiplication facts, maybe none of the kids know their multiplication facts. And I was like, and he could tell I'm kind of ramping, and he's like, Mom, you don't have to know your fives if you know your tens. And I was like, what? And he said, you don't have to know your fives if you know your tens. I said, dude, I heard what you said. I don't know what you mean. And he said, well, if you don't know, I said, give me an example. And he said, okay, you don't know 9 times 5. Well, 9 times 10 is 90, and 5 is half of 10, so half of 90 is 45. And I was like, good crap, does that work all the time? Give me another example. I'll never forget in this moment. He looked at me and he goes, okay, another example. 5 times 23. I'm thinking about single digit facts, and he's playing around with a pattern to reason. He's like, I don't know your fives if you know your tens. I'm like, what else don't I have to know? Like, what? And I was so intrigued with the mental actions that he did that he called math versus the mental actions my high school students did that we called math. And to be really clear, the ones I called math. And so I dove into research, and I read research studies and journal articles. And at the same time, I dove into my kids' classrooms. I literally went and said, can I enrich your students? But that was code for, can I experiment on them? And I just tried stuff. Like everything that I read, I then tried in classrooms. Because of my background in higher math, I was able to kind of sift through a lot of the less helpful research that's out there and find that we can actually intentionally help all of us do what he did kind of naturally. It's not that he had like super new cool teaching. He just had some sort of natural kind of inclination toward that. But I wanted to be cool like him. And the good news is we all can. That it became super controversial to me at that moment because I had a midlife crisis. What I thought I was good at was like fake math.
Oh, I'm definitely going to use the you don't need five facts like this week at the conference that I'm the MC of. So I'm definitely going to use that.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. And here, arguing the other side that we should not dump the algorithms, is someone known as the Lady Gaga of math education. She's the founder and director of the Math Guru, a super cool boutique math and science tutoring studio in Toronto that's changing stereotypes about what math education looks like. She's also the host of the Math Therapy podcast, author of the Math Hacks Scholastic book series, author of the new best-selling book Math Therapy, and lead singer, guitarist for the rock band Goodnight Sunrise. She appears regularly on national television and news outlets as an expert in math education and math positivity, and her hashtag goals are to be Oprah-level famous and to totally change math culture so that STEM is finally as cool as every single Taylor Swift song ever written. She also failed grade 11 math twice, which was the best thing that ever happened to her. It's Vanessa Vicaria. Hi, Vanessa.
Hello, thank you. I do forget that bio sounds really good on a piece of paper, but it very cringe when read aloud. You did the best job you could with what you had to work with, honestly.
We love it. Well, can you tell our listeners more about you? Where are you and what is your current role?
I am in cold, wintry Canada right now in Toronto, Ontario. Hashtag made in Canada. And my current role is I am a math therapist. So I work with students at my tutoring studio as well as in schools to help heal math trauma and build healthier relationships with math. And right now I'm doing a lot of work traveling around North America, working with teachers and helping and sharing with them strategies on how to heal the collective math trauma in our schools, in our society, and in our classrooms. That's what my main focus is right now.
Very good. And again, the question we ask all of our guests, when did math first become controversial for you?
Yeah, you know what? I love a good, juicy controversy. And I thought, I was like, oh my God. It's funny. I can think of so many ways in recent years or in the near, the recent future in which math has become controversial. But just like anything, I don't think math was ever controversial to me until I realized that I had been told a lie about my own math ability. So I think like math really became controversial for me after I failed grade 11 math twice, thought like, yeah, I'm just not a math person. And when the most incredible teacher proved, to kind of put a hole through that whole theory, and I ended up doing incredibly in grade 12 math, getting 100% in first year calculus. I know we don't care about grades, but like my point is like, guys, I was really good at math and had been led to believe that I wasn't the type of person who was good at math, that my creativity was a proclivity to math. It was hindering it, not helping it. So I think math became really controversial when I was like, and oh my goodness, oh my God. I was like, oh my God, I've gone through my entire life being told I'm not a math person. And that has been a big fat lie. How many other kids and adults have gone through the same thing? Where does this come from? Who gets to choose who's good at math or not? And that's when I got real pissed off, and it definitely became controversial.
Very good. Thanks to you both. And with that, let's get into the debate.
We begin with opening statements from each of our speakers. You each have 2 minutes to present your arguments, and we're going to start with Pam, arguing that we should dump the algorithms. Pam, you're up first. Your 2 minutes starts now.
Algorithms are amazing human achievements, but they are terrible teaching tools. Consider a little history. Think of a few naturally mathy people in our past. I submit that they wandered around the same world everyone else did and ran into low doses of mathematical patterns, the same way the rest of us did. But for whatever reason, they were able to pick up on a low dose, make sense of it, add onto it, create new patterns, use them, and then continue to develop more and more sophisticated mathematics. Part of that would be to generalize, creating algorithms that use complex relationships in non-transparent ways. Then, in a bad game of telephone, textbooks and systems took just that part of their work and made math class about getting answers using these opaque answer finding tools. This might have been important before we had technology, but it is no longer. I propose that now, in our day, the purpose of math class is to develop students' mathematical reasoning, which includes content. It's not some fuzzy think better. It's reasoning using the mathematical relationships that mathematicians used to develop algorithms in the first place. Mathematical reasoning is more powerful, more efficient, and more accessible. Algorithms can trap students in at least 3 ways. First, algorithms trap students from developing into better mathers because they can get correct answers using less sophisticated reasoning than the problems are intended to develop. Second, algorithms trap students into unreasonable answers because the algorithms turn everything into a digit focus. So students never have the opportunity to grapple with the magnitudes and relationships in the problems. And last, algorithms trap students into a false definition of math, that it's about rote memorizing facts and mimicking rules and procedures. If they're good at that, they're fooled into thinking they're good at math, when in reality they're good at fake math. If they're not good at that definition, they're trapped into thinking they're not a math person. We should dump the algorithms as teaching tools because without them, we can all be mathy people. We just need to know what real mathing is.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, just over 2 minutes. That's perfect. Now we'll hear from Vanessa, arguing that we should not dump the algorithms. Vanessa, you have 2 minutes. Your time begins now.
My claim is that ditching algorithms as a learning tool does a massive disservice to students who thrive on structured step-by-step approaches. Some kids just need to learn first how to do something before they can even begin to explore why it works. And taking that option away doesn't make math more accessible. It makes it way more intimidating, especially for students with math trauma. First, here are my warrants, okay? Here are my reasons. First, for students who already feel anxious about math, being asked to dive straight into deep conceptual reasoning with no clear process, that is a recipe for panic. It reinforces the belief that math is confusing, overwhelming, and just not for them. Second, let's talk real life. No one learns to drive by starting with an engine diagram. You don't bake a cake by studying the chemistry of flour. And when you get a new phone, you don't read the entire manual. You just follow the setup steps. In all of these cases, we follow instructions first, and then we figure out why things work the way they do when our curiosity is piqued, which it often is. Algorithms in math serve the same purpose for some kids. They provide structure, they create small wins, and they build confidence. Finally, eliminating algorithms as an entry point assumes that every single student learns the same way, which we know isn't true. Some kids thrive on discovery, some thrive on curiosity and figuring things out on their own, and some just need a roadmap first. I was definitely one of those kids. Math education should be about more access, more inroads, and more ways to engage, not shutting doors for the students who need structure to succeed.
Okay, thank you both. You already given us some good things to think about. We are going to dive right into questioning here. And I kind of want to pick up on what Vanessa was saying and ask Pam. So thinking about like students, sometimes students thrive with some structure and, they want to know like what the end goal is. And how do we make that clear if we're just kind of letting them openly play and never giving them like here's what we're working towards?
Yeah, it's excellent. So with that, you're sort of assuming that what I'm suggesting is that I'm going to kind of send kids off into a field and say, sure hope you can find the math out there and develop it on your own. And there's a lack of structure. For sure, it sort of feels like a lack of safety and that students aren't really clear what's expected of them. I think you even said if they don't know the goal. So that's absolutely not what I'm heading for. I think we need to have very specific goals that students learn, that there does need to be a structure that students understand and can be very clear about. And so I completely agree with Vanessa's point that in fact, I think most students need structure and thrive knowing what they're supposed to be doing when, but within that sort of place where they understand what's happening, like this is what's expected of me now, then we can really light the fire of curiosity because they're safe. They're safe. They know what's expected of them. And now we can help them. And here's maybe where I differ then. Many people, if you hear anybody sort of you think is on my side of the argument, it is much more like Chris just said. Oh, like let's let them explore and we'll let them play around with stuff. And so what I want to do is very, very purposefully know what are the major ways that mathematicians actually math. And then I want to help students develop that because mathematicians don't actually use algorithms to solve problems. They create algorithms because that's part of what they do is generalize and make connections and relationships. And so they create algorithms to describe those general relationships, but they don't actually use them to solve problems.
Controversial there. I'm wondering if we think about that, if mathematicians do use algorithms or not. I'll leave that. I want to come to Vanessa here. And so I like your sense of structure. Like, we want kids to feel safe and have clear structure in the lessons. I just wonder if we're using algorithms, are we just forcing kids to memorize rules and not making sense of things? As teachers teach towards the algorithm, are we just going to say, memorize this, kids, and move on?
Okay, so sorry. Can I just? I'm not allowed to respond to what
No, no, go ahead. Yeah,
because I do want to. Something Pam said is really interesting. So first of all, I love all of your points as well. So I mean, there's so much about that. I totally get that you're not saying like, oh, just go kind of do whatever and like play around and figure stuff out. And there's a more structured approach. But I really wonder. I'm hearing a lot of defining of what real mathematicians do, and just the idea of like real mathematicians don't use algorithms. I do kind of want to pick up on that because I worry that. I think there's a real risk in this discussion of saying, and I think we're both on the same side of this, of saying, look, we have been narrowly defining math as using algorithms, right? Like math has been defined as you use these algorithms, you pump out these answers. And as a result, so many kids get left out. Like they're not doing this amazing thinking that could be mathematical. But I would argue that while math is not simply algorithms, algorithms are a part of math. And I would imagine that tons of mathematicians use algorithms to solve problems. I'm a mathematician that uses algorithms to solve problems. So like, I'm nervous about saying like, if you use an algorithm, you're not doing real math. And if you don't, you are, because I think part of my purpose, at least in this discussion, and Chris, I'll address your question now, is that there are so many ways to be a mather. There are so many ways to do math. Using an algorithm is one way. Exploring and generalizing and coming up with your own algorithm is another way. But I don't like the idea of pitting those two against one another, because then think we get into this whole hierarchy of what real math is and what isn't. And that's why so many kids feel like they're not quote unquote math people, is because they've been told if you don't do math in this particular way, and there are a whole range of things, if you're not fast enough, if you're not doing mental math, if you're not getting the right answer, if you're not whatever, then you're not a real mathematician. And I don't like that.
Pam, do you want to respond before I ask my question?
All the things. So let me be really careful. I think we should dump the algorithms as teaching tools. So I'm not advocating that algorithms go away. I actually think we need general statements of relationships. And to be very clear, algorithms were super important before we had technology, because we needed to be able to keep the books in stores. And so people needed column arithmetic. So they didn't actually have to do a lot of taxing mental actions to be able to do the books for the shop. So it was very important that we had ways that many people could compute without actually doing what I would call like mathing. They were kind of computing, and that was super important. With the advent of technology, we need people who can do more than that. Mm-hmm. And this is not trivial. It's not trivial to now be asking ourselves, so what does that look like? So I'm not going to argue that mathematicians never use algorithms, but to pretend that if I have you, well, here, let me do this. How many of us had teachers that said, show me your work?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
As a teacher, I said, show me your work. But it didn't dawn on me until I really dove into this and really kind of started figuring out what my kid was actually doing with his mental actions, that when I said that, show me your work, I really meant show me my work. Yep. Which I think, Vanessa's, what part of what you're saying is like, let's not put everybody in this thing, like where you have to mimic me. So I'm just going to suggest that if we teach algorithms, a lot of kids can get correct answers by mimicking. And algorithms, if I'm mimicking the steps of an algorithm, I can get correct answers to, say, a multiplication problem using less sophisticated reasoning, additive reasoning. So I can look like I'm a multiplicative reasoner because I'm getting correct answers. And now I move up to a grade level to something that depends on me understanding multiplicative reasoning. But I didn't build multiplicative reasoning because the algorithm trapped me into looking successful, but I never developed that more sophisticated reasoning. Now I'm really trapped because now I have to learn harder math. Now I'm sort of trapped in it. All I can do is try to memorize which rule I'm looking at and what are the steps in that rule and when do I use that rule over this rule. Because earlier, when I had the opportunity to develop my brain to like make those mental connections, the algorithm let me get away without making those connections. So one of my missions is to help people understand that trap. So no matter if you're going to use algorithms in your class, be aware that that's something you've got to watch out for. You could have students literally halted in their progression because they're getting correct answers.
So, Pam, I'm wondering because I'm in a lot of classrooms all over like our state and the area, especially in the elementary classrooms. And oftentimes, like I might step foot into a first grade classroom and you see students doing the standard algorithm, where with for addition or subtraction. And teachers are very adamant that this is what needs to be done, regardless of what the standards actually say. That's a whole other conversation. But they are adamant about what that has to be done, and they're starting with the standard algorithm. So, what are your thoughts on the standard algorithm that teachers kind of rush to?
Yeah, the first thing that I would suggest is that you're using the word standard as in standard algorithm, and I'm going to push back on that. It is a traditional algorithm. So many of the viewers here might be interested to know that in different countries, there are different traditional algorithms. So I was just in Croatia in November, and they showed me how they multiply and they divide. It looks completely different. Of course, it uses some of the same relationships, but in a different order, and it looks completely different, and their steps are not like. So when we have this weird thing in the United States where we call it the standard algorithm, which gives it this kind of onus that must be the way, when in reality it's just one of the generalized sort of set of procedures that we could use to subtract or add. You might be interested to know that same kid that I told you about earlier had come home in first grade with a paper where his teacher had taught him subtraction with regrouping. And he had no marks, no little crossy outies and ones. He just had answers. And I was like, dude, are you cheating? And he goes, no, I couldn't understand what my teacher was doing. So I made it up my own way. I was like, that's not a thing. So remember, this is Pam pre. I'm like, no, math is like one way you do the thing. Like the definition of subtraction is you line things up and you do and you might say, Pam, nobody really gets trapped into thinking that. I did. Like I was completely trapped. The definition of subtraction for me was you line it up and you do that stuff. When he came home in second grade, he had the same paper. I didn't know what to do with it in first grade. This is how I deal with like conflict. I just kind of pushed it aside, ignored it. Life went on. I was busy. He came home in second grade and he hands me a paper, subtraction with regrouping. And I was like, dude, did you tell your teacher how you subtract? He said, no, I couldn't really remember what I did last year. So I made up another way. So we might hear that and go, oh, there's like this vast unknowable. Kids might do anything in the universe. Like there's no way. I want to push back on that. Part of my work that I think is super unique is I've identified the major relationships that kids need to own so that they do a few major strategies so that I can give them any problem that's reasonable to solve out of a calculator and they can solve it. While at the same time building their brains to reason more sophisticatedly. One of the things we've done wrong in the past, I'm going to say that strongly, is we've either direct taught algorithms and mimic the steps, or we've left kids alone to forage and said, do some mental math. Don't pick up that pencil. Do it in your head without ever helping them develop the major relationships. Most of us need more. In my opening statement, I talked about low doses of patterns. Most of us need a higher dose of those patterns to then own those mental relationships, to then use them to solve patterns. Most of us need more. My work, I've identified what I think those are. and put it out to the world. Here are the 4 major relationships that kids need to own for addition and subtraction. And if they own those, give me any problem that's reasonable to solve without a calculator, bam, I not only can solve it, but I'm building my brain so that I now have access to the next thing in mathematics. I kind of went long on that. Sorry.
Well, and it's okay. And so for Vanessa, like, so we're talking about keeping, algorithms, but what about like problem solving skills like needed for future jobs? Like, is there how do algorithms show up? And you talked about STEM in your in the bio, and then a little bit in your intro. How does that fit in? How do algorithms fit in with all that?
Well, okay. First, I have to say, Pam, I literally agree with everything you're saying. Like everything you're saying, I'm like, yes, 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 100%. So, debates over. No, I'm kidding. I think this is really the semantics of it, of like how you were like, I just want to clarify. I don't think we should be using algorithms as a teaching tool, and like, I think that's our point of agreement. I completely agree. I am also one of those kids that was really good at math in high school because I was really good at, I am good at math, at, a variety of math, but definitely memorizing formulas was something I was really great at, and following rules. And for sure, I was like literally 2 weeks today, years old, when I learned, why we flip and multiply when we're dividing fractions. You know what I mean? So I get it 100%. Like, I am not afraid to admit that and shout that out, that like, there are so many things I'm just learning now because I really did just get by with the algorithm, and I do think it does a disservice. But however, on the plus side, that way that I learned wasn't a hindrance. Am I learning some stuff a little later? Yeah. You know what? I didn't actually need to know why to why we like multiply or we divide. Like, I didn't actually need to know that. I'm fine. But I have mathematical confidence. I have curiosity. I'm now never afraid. I feel intelligent and smart and like I belong in this space. And I'm allowed to say at at my age now, I actually really don't know that. Can you teach it to me now? So I think I'm kind of like, I'm with you that as a primary teaching tool, at this point, you're right. It is not actually teaching the mathematical skills that this generation needs. I am with you. I think my difference is like, some students I think do need it. I do run a tutoring center, so I do work a lot one-on-one with students. So I think probably my experience is a little more like, hey, sometimes there's a student who really is so conditioned by our system to be like, I am not even trying this unless I know what the rule is, that I'm like, all right, babe, like, let me give you this now. And I know that'll get them their confidence going. They'll get the answer, which is all they care about. And over time, they'll learn that the answer is not so important, and they'll have the confidence to ask why. So like, I don't even think we're that far on it. I agree that as a main teaching tool, it's not at this point in 2025 teaching our kids the mathematical skills we need them to walk away with, but I do think that once in a while it is it's something I rely on, and that certain students can really benefit from, in order to get to the level of curiosity they need to just start asking the why and investigating, if that makes sense.
It does. And I'm popping in.
I didn't even answer Rob's question. I was like, cool. So what if Pam said?
No, I forgot Rob's question.
As Chris did too. It's okay.
I really appreciate that. I think in some ways we are, at least in some ways, we have a different role where you do sit down with a student who's got math anxiety or who's sick and tired of the game and just needs to get through. And you're doing a service to that student to help them achieve their goals. And for right now, the quickest, fastest, most foolproof way for them to get an answer, bam, let's do it. Let's help, take the anxiety down, or help maybe, like you said, try to raise some interest. That makes complete sense to me. And I'm just going to admit, it's why I don't like to tutor.
Yeah.
Because in that moment, I want to I want to back up and not back up and do second grade math with them, but I want to give them some sense of like what's underneath what they're doing. And I would do it a completely different way. And to be clear, I wouldn't have time. So if you give me a student that right now I'm going to see them 3 times a week and I'm supposed to help them pass their class, I don't have time to redo everything in that tutoring time. So I think we have sort of different roles. I view the role, at least in that way, I view the role that I'm filling right now as I have a message that I think many people have never really considered. Because either they went into math like I did, sounds like maybe you, where we bought into the myth that math is memorize this stuff and spit it back out.
It was also like the only option for us, right? Like that's what was happening at school.
It's what they told us.
Yeah.
They said this is math, and I was like, okay, I will do that then. And I think that it can trap you. Then I got trapped into thinking I was good at math. Imagine my midlife crisis when I realized I was actually good at fake math and not real math. But then most kids who don't rote, memorize, and mimic well, and they go, that's what math is? Well, that's stupid. It has nothing to do with my life. I don't do that well. I hate math. When am I ever going to use this? And we get all of that kickback, but it's all based on a false sense of what mathing actually is. So I'm on a mission to really give this, I think I'm in a unique position to go, no, I get where you were. By the way, I get where people like I was, but I think now I also get people like my kid who kind of naturally pick on stuff. I work with a lot of teachers who go, no, Pam, that's how I've always thought about math. And I go, ooh, can I help you help your students do that? And so many math teachers will look at me and go, oh gosh, yes, because I try to get them excited. And I'm like, want to know why that works? Want to know where that came from? Want to know how that's connected? And the kids go, no, la, 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 la. And I say, ooh, but I have a way to help you get that into your kids. And teachers that kind of were naturally that way love it because all of a sudden they can give that stuff that they kind of naturally loved. They can help the rest of us love it the same way. Part of my work is identifying what are the major mathematical relationships that lead to the major strategies, and then how do we actually teach those? Can we do one real quick just for fun? It's super short.
Yeah,
super short.
sure.
If I were to ask you right now, what's 99 plus anything? Like pick an ugly number, just ugly.
73 is not an
73.
Not an ugly number. It's just the number.
It's brilliant. It's brilliant. Do you know that almost all the time someone will say a number with a 7 in it?
It's a lucky number.
That's just anecdotal, but so if I say what's 99 and 73, 99. Do you get an urge when I do that? 99.
I'm going to go to 100 and add 72.
And then 72. So where did you learn to do that?
I just thought of it right now. Here.
Well, and it isn't necessarily even about easy. It's about a relationship that you just had never seen. Let's like see it. And so now people will say, but Pam, that's like only 99 plus stuff. Well, 98 plus something? Could I just 2, like 2 to get to 100 and then add the rest just minus 2? What if I were to ask you 999 plus something? Could you add 1,000 and back up 1 or get, so now you okay? Vanessa, we're just checking in on you. You're thinking.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm
okay. I wasn't sure. I was trying to read your face.
Yeah, no.
So then could I also ask the question, what about 99 times something? What if I wanted 99 73s? Do I know something about 173s? Okay, well, there's this place value pattern in our number system, so that would be like 7,300. But I only want 99 73s. So it's not 7,300. It's a little bit, more or less? If I only want 99, a little bit less. How much less?
So it's basically like going through without a traditional algorithm. I almost said it. Without a traditional algorithm, it's going into, looking at patterns and making connections and finding representations and things like that. So, right? Okay. So Chris, I'll send it to you and let you ask the next question.
Yeah, I want to change topics a little bit here.
Well, gosh, I have to say one quick thing. One of the big tenets of my work is that good Grady, I'd give you a pen or pencil, or I really wish I was writing that down when I just said those problems. I would totally write those down because in a huge way, most of us can deal with the relationships I just said if we can see them. Like even if we just see the numbers written, I like to do some spatial models to also help with that. But just seeing the numbers itself, that we have a dumb thing in our society that says you're only cool if you do mental math in your head. Nah, mental math is when you do it with your head. I'm quoting Kathy Fosno, who's an elementary researcher. I just have to give her credit for that. Mental math means that you're doing it with your head, not in your head. Totally legal to keep track of your mental thinking. So just know, I would never put you in the position, unless we're on a podcast where we're not writing, to just expect you to hold those in your head. I don't hold that stuff in my head. When I can write stuff down, I can math with the best of them. You make me do it all in my head? Nah. I gotta write stuff down. All right. Sorry. Thanks.
So Vanessa, I want to take back to your opening statement. Like you mentioned, math anxiety and math trauma stuff with students. And I'm just thinking like in the world of tech where, AI can calculate everything for the students if they just like, take a picture of it with their phone or speak into their phone. Like, what role does algorithms play for students, and or where do you see it being used, or where should teachers kind of rely on algorithms, or when with all this like tech world stuff going on top of math anxiety and all that stuff?
It's funny, like this, even just like us getting to this point in this interview, I think has brought up a lot of stuff for me because I'm listening to this and thinking, why do I feel so passionately even about having this discussion? And I'm hearing, while I think we have a lot of agreements about a lot of things, I'm hearing a lot of, like, I'm thinking about how I'm emotionally reacting to this and feeling like, oh, wow, some really interesting things are coming up for me, basically being, and again, I know you're not directing this at me, but what we're calling real and fake math. Like, you're making a lot of mentions of like, then I realized I was just good at fake math and I wasn't doing real math. And I just think it brings up a lot for me of there always being a reason I'm not really good at math. There always has been ever since I've been younger. And this whole, I think this angle of saying algorithms aren't real math. I'm sorry, Chris, I am answering your question. I think it really ties into math anxiety of this idea of um you're in a sense inventing another rule around what it means to do real math and who does it. What value is of the person who does it. And, yeah, we're moving into this technological world. We're moving into a world with, AI and calculators. But when we think about jobs like coding, they're based on algorithms. And there's still a role for those things. There's a role for understanding algorithms. And I don't really agree that every single person that learns an algorithm is going to get stuck in this trap where they're no longer thinking. Like, I really think that perhaps actually it's not the algorithm that's the problem, but it's the way we've been using it or the way we've stopped at the algorithm. But I think an algorithm as a window into something that exists already can be a really beautiful thing. Like, again, like picking up your phone, I have no idea how this works when I got it. It exists. It's in my hand and I want to use it. And as I start using it, I become curious about its features and why it's doing these things. How did my friend just send me a text that had a heart on it? What did they do to get that? And then I learn how that function happens because I'm curious about it. And I think there is, I just don't think that it's black and white. I think that black and white thinking of it's either you're doing this and it's fake and it's not real, or you're not doing it and you're really thinking and you're doing math and you're going to be valuable in the future. I think it's a fallacy, and I think it pits us against each other. I think it pits those who can't and those who are deserving against those who traditionally can't and those who aren't deserving. And I think it actually puts teachers in a really tough spot too, of saying, if you're doing this, you're doing it wrong and you're teaching it the wrong way and you're going to trap students, as opposed to being like, hey, even for a lot of teachers who are anxious around math, and we know there are a lot of them, sometimes an algorithm for them is an inroad into teaching a concept, having it out there, opening it up, and then being able to explore it within the safety of the confines of what they already know, So I think there is a space for it. And I think, you even mentioned this yourself. You said that mathematicians don't use algorithms, which I don't agree with, but you said they invent them. And I mean, well, then what are our students doing in this new world? They're going to invent or continue to create algorithms. And if they're creating algorithms, I assume someone is going to be using them.
Mostly computers, if you want me to answer that. Algorithms are brilliant. They're amazing human achievements, and we need them for computers because computers have to follow algorithms. Okay. That's how we absolutely need them. I'll tell you just one more quick story. So I have 4 kids. I took a risk with my first one. I'm not going to go too far into it, but at one point he said, I've always ignored what my teacher did and done my own thing, but now will you teach me long division? And we had this whole thing, and I was ready to tell the world, we're going to dump algorithms as teaching tools. And so in that moment, I kind of had to make a decision about what I was going to do. Of my 4 kids, none of them I took a risk. None of them ever learned traditional algorithms, and they can math with the best of them. They don't actually like math all that much, but they can math, and it hasn't stopped them from becoming computer scientists, English major, and landscape architect. But number 3 graduated a year and a half ago from Brigham Young University as a computer scientist. And he called me one day in the middle of his last semester, and he said, Mom, thank you. And I was like, for what? Bring it. And he said, Mom, you'll never guess the class I'm taking right now. And I was like, okay. And he's like, computer science, algorithms. I was like, tell me more about that. And he said, it's fascinating to me that there's basically two groups of kids in this class. Everybody who was like you when you were younger, who wrote, memorized, and mimic, they're failing this class because they don't understand what's actually happening. And so they can't create algorithms. Those are the kids who always reasoned through stuff and then therefore built their brains to be able to actually understand what's kind of happening. We can create algorithms. Thanks for that. So I offer, Vanessa's hating it. I offer to you an example of what can happen when kids actually understand what's going on. Then they can create the algorithms that we need for technology. Algorithms are not evil. They're just terrible teaching tools.
So I totally hear that. And I bet that a large reason many of these kids were failing in this story is because they were, taught in this way. But I would actually step back and say, I would love to look at so many of the other factors that were involved here. For example, let's just even take this. So, like this situation of saying the kids who were taught through algorithms, who thought they were good at math and who were in there, were able to do the thinking needed to create an algorithm. So I would actually, this is kind of like when you do studies about like smoking and heart disease, and it's so hard because you're like, yeah, but usually people who are chain smoking are also eating red meat and they're also drinking. So I would actually wonder, I'm looking at kids in a computer science program who are really high achieving students, right? What other factors prevented them from thinking? Was it because they were taught algorithmically? Was it because, are there other factors? Were they always taught, were they labeled as gifted? Were they taught, to only get the right answer is the only important thing? Like, what was math culture at home like? Was it all just about worksheets? Like, I think there are so many other things that would contribute to this idea of it's because they were taught via the algorithm that they don't have the creative thinking capacity, because I just don't think that's true. Like I was taught purely by an algorithm, and my joy in math was creative thinking. I would sit through problems and I would say, I wonder if I can come up with a different algorithm. I didn't know the word algorithm, but like, I'd be like, I wonder if I can come up with another way to do this problem. Like that was certainly not a hindrance. And so much of that has to do with me and my life and all of the creative pursuits and things I did and what kind of knowledge was valued in my household. So like, I just, you know what I'm saying? I'm just kind of like, I don't, again, I am going to agree with you though, overall, that like the procedure of being like, we teach math class by showing kids algorithms. I agree with you that is not the way to go. So like, we're just in agreement there. Like, you know what I mean? Anything I say, I just want to caveat, like we are in agreement there, because I do think it does more harm than good on the whole, if that is the only number one priority in math class. But I think there's a way to involve an algorithm. I also wonder too, like I'm just like, you're creating these algorithms. It would be nice to have, to have a look at what they're like. What's an algorithm? Get to know a couple of them. Like, I just wonder if that's part of the role of the algorithm, is like, yeah, it can be a teaching tool to be like, hey, these are what these things are and how they developed, like, which is probably part of the work you're doing anyways. I think the reason I get a little like worked up over it is I hate black and white thinking. And I hate the idea of being like, anyone who learns via an algorithm is doing fake math and they can't think.
To be really clear, it is not a value judgment on any person by any means.
I know, but when we say words like fake math or like,
Sure.
it's
like
it's
it can feel like
It's laden with
I hear that. I can completely hear that. And Kim, my co-host on the Math is Figureoutable podcast, is saying, told you, Pam, because she's told me for a while that, so one of the reasons I use fake and real math is to get people's attention. But I'm also really clear that I think everybody can do more real math than they could fake math. So if we can actually set kids loose from being trapped by thinking, wait, math was only this one way, and you and I are both totally in agreement, right? It's not just one way, and it's not just my way or the highway. If we can break kids out of that, man, then we just get, even people who aren't as creative as you are can bring their creativity to bear and do a lot more. So it's not a value judgment on people for sure.
I love this nuanced discussion, and Vanessa, you're like, I don't see things black and white is the whole point of this podcast, right? We're having all this nuance. I want to just end with one last question here, because we're definitely getting far on our time here. But for question wise, I just want to ask, thinking about like advice to teachers, Pam. So for you, Pam, thinking about like they have state standards or, district expectations or common assessments where they have to teach certain algorithms or whatever, right? Like their kids have to be tested on
Well,
the
do
certain
they?
a certain algorithm, but like that is the way it's tested, or they have to show their work in a certain method or something. So what advice do you have for teachers when they're in like a really strict system where they don't have a lot of leeway and they, students have to show a certain style of solving a problem, let's say?
Sure. It's an excellent question because the first thing I'm not going to do is tell teachers to get into an untenable position. Um, Everyone I've talked to who thinks they're in this position where they have to, the kids are going to be penalized if they don't show certain steps. Then when we get down to the nitty gritty, really, if the students can reason through the problem, and again, remember, it's not this vast unknowable. There's just a few major strategies. I kind of wonder, Vanessa, a few times if we define terms a little bit differently. I wonder if sometimes when you said kids create their own algorithms, if you actually meant create their own strategies. So I'm really picky how I define those because it's my work, right, to help kind of parse that out. So if teachers have a standard, and most teachers, third grade teachers have a standard, the student will use strategies and algorithms or sometimes it'll say the standard algorithm. I'll fight against that. But to subtract, where a fourth grade teacher often uses multiplication algorithm to multiply, or fifth grade teachers use division to divide. Often in an algebra 2 class, it will say use the quadratic formula to something. In those cases where I'm in Texas, it's by law. By law, you have to teach that. I have no problem with that. In that year, my brief but not trivial advice to teachers is that you spend the entire year really building students' mathematical connections. You really help them gain the relationships that help certain major strategies become natural outcomes. And they're going to be sharing strategies. They're going to be, hey, Vanessa, how'd you do it? And as she explains, I'm going to be making her thinking visible so we can point at it and we can discuss it. And then I'm going to say, well, is that like Chris just did this? Can anybody use Vanessa's strategy on this problem? Well, I know, Chris, you did it that way, but we're all going to try Vanessa's strategy this time. A lot of ownership when kids come up with one of the major ones, and we get, and I'm very careful to watch for equity, that I'm positioning all students as sense makers. When we get to that position that we've been doing that kind of comparing all year long, and we really are understanding how each other are thinking, the end of the year, last day, I'm going to go, hey, we've been listening to each other's thinking all year long. Here's a way that your parents might have learned. Why does this work? Now, to be really clear, I'm not going to teach it as a bunch of steps to mimic. So now it's not a teaching tool. Now maybe I'm going to say it's a teaching tool in a different way. I'm going to say, why does it work to line these numbers up? And the kids' place value and sense of what's happening is going to be so good that they're going to go, it's kind of weird that they started with the small numbers because they're like inconsequential. Like we always usually start with the big numbers because they kind of matter. But okay, like they could start with the small numbers. Oh yeah, look, they're kind of kicking over. They're going to understand the algorithms better than most teachers did their second year of teaching because they're actually understanding what's going on. We can totally study the algorithm. We meet the standard. Algorithms aren't evil. They're just terrible teaching tools. In that moment, we've studied it. We've improved our mathematical understanding, but it hasn't become a crutch that we use without thinking. If we want a crutch to use without thinking, pull out your calculator. They're on all of our cell phones now. If that's what you want, then we can do it that way. What I want to do is empower kids by building their brains with more and more mathematical relationships.
And then similar, Vanessa, thinking about students who have been burned from, this like just memorize the algorithm, mimic me kind of style. Like what advice do you have for teachers to help students enjoy working with algorithms or, make sense of the algorithms? Like what kind of advice do you have for teachers and working with students to really help students feel confident in math?
I probably agree with a lot of what Pam just said. Like, I think I like kind of how you said, well, I guess we are, in this scenario that you're talking about, you're using algorithms as a teaching tool, but in a very different way. Like this idea of, well, let's examine why this algorithm works. And actually, that's why I think we're not that far apart on this, because I also think that that's part of the joy of an algorithm is it's like, when you get, I'm trying to pretend that I'm into robotics, but I'm not. But, when you get something, those people who like really like to take apart radios. Okay. You know what I'm saying, right? Like you like to like take apart things that are already built. That's how I envision like maybe the new role of the algorithm is like, it's here, it's built. You use it. You know how to turn your radio on. You know how it functions. Now let's take it apart and see why. And I think an algorithm can be really, really cool that way of being like, sometimes kids want the security of seeing the thing already built. You know, a lot of anxiety in math is around just the conditioning, which is this amazing work that Pam's trying to undo, right? She's going into these places where kids are conditioned to just want the answer in the algorithm. And Pam, you're doing incredible work of being like, hey, look, I'm going to show you all this way cooler stuff. And in the end, kids are probably more confident. They're thinking, more of them feel included in the conversation. I guess part of what I see is the part before that, right? Is there are, you know, there's sometimes they're so conditioned that they can't see their way out of that to get to this beautiful stuff yet. They're like, I'm in grade 10 and you're telling me now you want me to just figure, do this amazing stuff Pam's doing, which is amazing, but they already have so much anxiety. They're already now so stressed about just getting the right answer. They're so conditioned that it's like, fine, I'm going to give it to you already built. And then you can take it apart. You have the security of it's built. You know how to work it. You know how to use it. And now we take it apart and learn it. And I actually think that has been a really, really cool way to use an algorithm as a tool with my students with math anxiety, is to give it to them, let them use it, be like, okay, you feel better now that you can get the answer to the question. Now that you're de-escalated and you can get this outcome that I wish you didn't want so badly, now let's talk about why it's so cool and take it apart. So I think that would probably be my advice. And even my advice to teachers who probably feel anxious around this whole idea because they don't feel they understand the math well enough themselves, is to even maybe take that approach. Like, learn what you feel like you need to learn to teach the thing you need to teach, and then have some fun playing around with it. Like, honestly, like Pam has incredible strategy. She has so many great resources online. Like, it's a really great way to have your cake and eat it too, I think. Have security in the algorithm, but also figure out how it works and experiment with it a bit yourself and see what happens. I think approaching math with curiosity in mind instead of with an attachment to outcome in mind is the way to math joy. It's the way to release the anxiety. But the truth is, we so far have conditioned kids to just want the outcomes. And if we really want kids to notice and to wonder and to do all of this, to approach things with curiosity, we have to get rid of that fear. And sometimes getting rid of that fear lies in the security of having something to hold on to.
Okay. I love the phrase "the joy of an algorithm." I'm going to ponder that, but I'm going to pause us there on our questioning round. We will now end by giving each side a minute or two to make their final arguments to you, and we'll begin with Pam. The floor is yours.
Vanessa, I wonder if you were to think about and invite everybody. You mentioned a lot about structure and having students feel comfortable, and that maybe we need to kind of give them to something to hang on to, so that then they can relax and have the anxiety go down and do something. I'd invite you to check out the instructional routine called problem strings. Problem strings are a very specific way of helping kids develop these patterns, grab those, get a high dose of the patterns. For example, I might do something like, say, what is 27 plus 10? And then I would write that on the board so nobody's having to hang on to it. And everybody would, if I'm going to ask that, people would know 27 plus 10, or I'd do a simpler problem. And then I might ask 27 plus 9. And then I might say something like 46 plus 20. Not 46 plus 20, that's just 66. Well, then what's 46 plus 19? And whatever, I'm not going to make you remember what it was, but would it just be one less than what it was? And what if I gave you something like 78 plus, I'm coming up off the cuff here, 68 plus 30. 68 plus 30 is 98. Well, what if it was 68 plus 29? Like, you start to get this feel, I'm going to high dose you with a particular pattern. So it really is far, far from this idea of leaving kids just floating aimlessly without something to hang on to that they can feel comfortable and secure and build off of, while at the same time giving them creativity, because then they can say, well, this is how I thought about it. Even if you're doing that pattern up here, here was my thought. Okay. I would invite everybody to consider that there is a way that we can help students think and reason the way that naturally mathematicians, professional mathematicians do math more than just rote memorizing and mimicking. And the good news is then we reach more students, less anxiety, because math is figure outable.
Thank you, Pam. And with the final word, it's Vanessa. Vanessa, the floor is yours.
Okay, so I get it. I've loved this debate, and I think we both want the same things for students, and that's really reassuring and really exciting. And I think one of the coolest things about having these discussions is seeing how many approaches there are out there to get to the same goal, which is students who have healthy relationships with math, who all feel included. And I think we're both doing completely different things in the space, and I love all of the work you're doing, and I really admire it, and I think it's really, really needed, especially as we move forward into this differently mathematical world. So I just want to start by saying that. And I kind of want to continue by saying I get it that algorithms aren't always the answer, and I completely understand why educators worry that focusing too much on procedures can limit deeper understanding. But here's the thing for me that I hope I've made really, really clear. Going to the other extreme and acting like algorithms are the enemy is, to me, just another version of the black and white thinking we're trying to move away from in the education space as a whole. The goal isn't to force every student down the same path. It's to create as many entry points as possible. And I get that by creating different ways for kids to look at math, whether they're using algorithms, patterns, noticing and wondering, group work. There's so many different ways to get kids to look at math in a different way and find the way that really, really connects with them, to spark that little fire underneath them, to get them to be curious and to think creatively. Some kids need to explore concepts first. Others need a clear, structured process before they can begin to even ask why. So many of them have been conditioned by a system that has taught them that the algorithm and the right answer is king. And while maybe the goal is to eventually get rid of that, because I believe attachment to outcome actually limits curiosity, I think we have to meet a lot of kids where they're at now to get them to take that next step. When we dismiss algorithms completely, we're not making math more accessible, I don't think. I think we're actually shutting the door on an entire group of students that need that structure to succeed, that particular type of structure to succeed, at least right now. At the end of the day, though, we all want the same thing, kids who feel confident in math. And I believe the only way to make that happen is to give them all the tools, not just the ones that work for some.
Well, thank you both. That concludes our debate. That was delightful, and you've given us so much to think about today.
And now it's up to our listeners to take a moment, ponder the arguments from both sides, and share with your friends to, consider what resonated with you. Be sure to follow us on Blue Sky at Debate Math Pod to share which of your thoughts you agree with on this debate.
And again, huge thanks to both of our guests. You were thoughtful, you were respectful, you were allowed to agree with each other at times, which I loved. And you find little ways you disagree, but that's okay. Like, agree to disagree in a very respectful and lovely way.
And thanks to all those who are listening to an episode that was cooler than any Taylor Swift song ever written. We hope you enjoyed and learned from this, and hopefully you'll join us next time.
As we wrap up, Pam, where can listeners find you or more about your work?
Mathisfigureoutable.com. And I'm on all social media, just Pam Harris.
And Vanessa, where can listeners find you?
Maththerapy.com, and I'm at The Math Guru on all social media. Instagram is my favorite, though, so head on over there. And it's not mean yet. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Good to know. All right. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Want to learn more about incorporating debate activities into your math classroom? Go to luzniak.com/podcast to sign up for my mailing list and get your first set of example debate activities you could use with your students today. Go to luzniak.com/podcast.
Don't forget to reach out to us with comments and questions on debatemath.com, or follow us on Twitter at DebateMathPod, and follow along with #DebateMathPod.
Rate us and review us on Apple Podcasts,
or wherever you listen to this podcast. Your feedback is super important to us.
Well, that's all from us.
Looking forward to debating with you more next episode. Until next time, cheers.